There's been major strides made in closing the gender pay gap. However, the tax system still disadvantages single women. Stellenbosch University's Dr. Steenkamp says equalizing taxes has not equalized outcomes. Single women enjoy less rebates and effectively pay more tax. So let's get more from Dr. Steenkamp now, who joins us to discuss this even further. Doc, thank you for your time and good morning to you. I mean, not the Women's Month news that we kind of were hoping for, but important to highlight and discuss and put to the forefront. So equal pay but unequal taxes. I mean, how did South African women, particularly single women, find themselves carrying a greater tax burden?
Good morning, and thank you so much for having me. So on the face of it, our tax system does not explicitly discriminate against women, because we have a unisex tax table after all. However, when you start scratching the surface, you realize that the tax system has not kept pace with the socio-economic realities that women find themselves in. And that's what I set out to do in my research for the article that I wrote for the annual Women's Report. So during the apartheid years, there was a different tax dispensation. There was a separate personal income tax table for married men, another table for married women, and a third table for unmarried individuals. And married women paid the highest taxes. And this was fortunately done away with when we got our constitution. However, that has resulted in some unintended consequences, and we refer to that as implicit biases. And that's what I talk about in my article.
Yeah. Doc, may we just take it back, to apartheid in terms of discriminatory tax systems of the apartheid years, and just perhaps give us some context. We know that previously it had disadvantaged more working married women. What's the context around then where we are today?
Right, so the reasoning for that back then was that families, dual households, enjoyed economies of scale. The women stayed at home, the husband worked, and therefore it made sense in that context. But as more women joined the labor market, and unfortunately we also see that there's a very high prevalence of single parents, single mother households in South Africa, the tax system did not keep pace with that. So earlier on you alluded to the fact that single mothers enjoy less rebates or fewer rebates than married ones. It's not because there's anything necessarily wrong with the tax legislation. It is because of the underlying socio-economic conditions. So if we look at the stats from Statistics SA, as well as from the Revenue Authority, we see that more than 40% of households in South Africa are headed by breadwinners that are female. And if you look at the child rearing aspect of it, there's 42% of children living only with a mother versus 4% only living with a father. And that is where the discrimination comes in. It's single versus dual households.
Yeah. And I understand this is why you emphasize closer attention needs to be placed on this, because of also the gender bias impact this has.
Absolutely. So that is just for personal income taxes. And if we look at the tax statistics, we see that women still congregate at the lower tax brackets. And as you move up in the tax brackets, the top earners are still men. Only 14% in the top tax bracket are women. So I think this is symptomatic of the historic gender pay gap that is still persisting, not just in South Africa, but globally. And also because women take career breaks to have children, to care for family members. So again, that is symptomatic of the fact that women tend to fulfill the caregiving role, unpaid care work, whereas men can focus more on their careers. And I think it's time that government takes a look at our tax system, specifically focusing on gender issues.
Right. Doc, I also want to touch on VAT. What's been your analysis on the impact on VAT?
Right, so personal income tax and VAT form the bulk of our tax collections in South Africa, and across the world we see that for developing economies, VAT is one of the largest, if not the largest contributor. And again, when you look at the data for value-added taxes, we see that the burden of consumption taxes falls disproportionately on women, especially lower income women. And that is, again, due to the caregiving role that women fulfill. So women have lower incomes and they have to spend that on education for the children, doctor's visits, medicine, food, basic household stuff. Now, our VAT system does provide some relief in the form of zero-rated items. So you may recall from a few years ago, there was a lot of pushback from civil society groups, which resulted in certain feminine hygiene products being included in that list of zero-rated items, which is good. So essentially, the 15% VAT is passed on as a cost saving, theoretically at least, to consumers. So perhaps there's some scope for government to expand that list of zero-rated items and look at those household goods and the services that women have to pay for and add that to the list as well.
I appreciate this conversation, also the recommendation you make there, Dr. Steenkamp. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Stellenbosch Business School Senior Lecturer in Taxation, Dr. Steenkamp.